Elon Musk recently announced on X that the first Starship mission to Mars, carrying a Tesla robot on board, is scheduled to take place by the end of next year, 2026. If the mission goes well, crewed flights to Mars could begin as early as 2029 or 2031. However, Musk is no stranger to making bold and often controversial statements on X, frequently announcing ambitious technological developments and future plans. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and to a brand new episode of our space exploration series. We're once again heading to infinity and beyond, diving into stars, planets, and the latest news from the world of space and astronautics. Get ready. Today we've got something truly exciting to talk about.
The back of the cable. See what the field of view looks like. That's a turnaround view, right? You better. I don't want to go into the sun if I can avoid it. That's right, Jim. I'm just leaving. Alright, let it sit like that and walk around it. I used to have that field of view going to be. They've got the mesa.
We've talked a lot about Elon Musk on this channel, and we all know he's a genius in many areas, from space engineering to electric vehicles and artificial intelligence. But, as is often the case with visionary minds, sometimes he tends to move a bit too fast and jump ahead of the timeline. So the big question is, will we really land on Mars as early as 2029 or 2030? And more importantly, will there actually be humans on board those first missions to the Red Planet? Let's try to bring some clarity. We'll dive into the details, separate what's realistic from what might just be hype or part of Musk's bold communication strategy. Even though the announcement came as a simple post on X, it sparked a huge conversation, not just among space enthusiasts, but also among industry experts. If Starship's upcoming tests succeed, we might be closer than we think to seeing the first human mission to Mars, but let's take it step by step. At this point, some of you might be wondering, what exactly is Starship? For those who are new to the channel or missed our previous videos, let's do a quick recap. Starship is the largest, most powerful, and most ambitious rocket ever built in human history. It's being developed by SpaceX, Elon Musk's aerospace company, and it's at the core of the plan to send humans to Mars and eventually even further. The rocket stands at around 120 meters tall, roughly the height of a 30-story building, and it's designed to be fully reusable. That means, in theory, it can launch, land, and take off again multiple times, dramatically reducing the cost of space travel. So far, 8 test flights have been conducted, with some impressive results, but also some fiery failures. It's important to note, none of these flights have carried humans. They've all been uncrewed test launches, aimed at collecting data and improving the technology. In short, Starship is still a work in progress, but it's the centerpiece of a much bigger vision: interplanetary exploration. While Starship is often linked to future Mars missions, its first major goal is actually much closer to home: the Moon. The rocket has been selected by NASA as a key component of the Artemis program, the new space initiative aimed at returning humans to the Moon, including the historic first landing of a woman on the lunar surface. So yes, Starship is designed for interplanetary missions in the long run, but before it heads to Mars, it needs to prove itself on the Moon. If you're interested in a deep dive video all about the Artemis program, its goals, timeline, and the tech behind it, let me know in the comments. I'm already working on it. and it might be coming to the channel soon. Elon Musk's vision involves transporting astronauts in a capsule that will rendezvous with a Starship in orbit. Once docked, they will use the Starship to land on and return from the lunar surface. The key question, however, remains: how far along is the Starship program really? A significant milestone was reached during the 8th flight test, which took place on March 6th at Starbase in Texas. During this test, the booster successfully completed its burn during ascent. As I mentioned previously, during that flight, test number 8, 4 out of the 6 Starship engines shut down approximately 8 minutes after liftoff. I also talked about the shutdown of the main engine and how the Starship ultimately exploded. I even showed you the video of the explosion. If you missed it, just click the link in the top right corner to watch it again. But now, let's take a step back and explore what the Starship booster is truly capable of, and how it could operate at its full potential. One critical point to highlight is that the Starship lost contact with the spacecraft during the flight. A very serious and concerning issue, especially considering the long-term goal of carrying astronauts on board. What makes this even more interesting and worrisome is that a similar issue occurred during Flight 7, when a leak caused significant complications. This suggests that SpaceX is still dealing with technical challenges related to the latest version of the ship, particularly in terms of engine performance and propellant system integrity, both of which are crucial for future crewed missions to the Moon and eventually to Mars. Let me be clear. I'm not an engineer, but based on the official data released by SpaceX, it's pretty obvious that, at least for now, Starship is not yet ready to safely carry humans or even robots in fully operational missions. In this video, I won't be diving into completion percentages or technical graphs. I'll leave that to the professionals. However, from an engineering perspective, Elon Musk's forecasts do seem quite optimistic, perhaps overly so. That said, I can still walk you through some of the key phases in Starship's development so far, highlighting what's been accomplished and what still needs improvement. Here are a few important points to consider. Starship has never actually completed an orbital flight. So far, all test flights have been suborbital. In other words, it has never gone all the way around the Earth. That's because SpaceX has not yet fully demonstrated Starship's capabilities. For instance, the Raptor engines have never been ignited in orbit, although there was a brief ignition during one of the test flights. Before we can even talk about true orbital missions, Starship first needs to prove it can deorbit, that is, return from space in a controlled manner. Otherwise, we risk leaving a massive 50-meter tall spacecraft floating aimlessly in orbit, which is far from ideal. In that scenario, Starship would essentially become a piece of space debris, potentially threatening other satellites or, in rare cases, even posing a risk to Earth. But don't worry, I'm not trying to alarm you. The point is simply to highlight how important it is to properly test every phase of the mission. The second point has to do with Starship's design. As it stands, the base version of Starship doesn't carry enough propellant to complete a round-trip journey to the Moon or Mars. To achieve those missions, SpaceX will need to perform orbital refueling, a complex maneuver that has yet to be demonstrated successfully. This is why Starship requires a maneuver that has never been performed before in the history of spaceflight: orbital refueling. The idea is that an initial Starship, slightly modified, will be launched into low Earth orbit, serving purely as an orbital fuel depot. Then, the mission-ready Starship will also reach orbit and dock with the first one. Once connected, propellant will be transferred from the tanker to the active spacecraft. Only after this complex process will Starship be truly ready for its journey to the Moon or Mars. From an engineering standpoint, this is an incredibly ambitious challenge, something that has never been done before, and which demands an extraordinary level of precision, timing, and reliability. The third key challenge is the heat shield, which is currently not yet fully adequate. In various test flights, we've seen how re-entry into Earth's atmosphere has repeatedly caused issues for Starship, particularly around the hinges of the aerodynamic surfaces. Throughout these tests, the heat shield has been redesigned multiple times to try out different materials, including an entirely new technology based on regenerative cooling. However, this system is still far from being fully reliable, especially when considering future missions to Mars, where the atmosphere is much thinner than Earth's, making re-entry even more challenging. What is Mars made of? Let's break down what Mars is actually made of, from its thin atmosphere all the way to its deep interior. 1. The atmosphere. Mars has a very thin atmosphere, about 100 times less dense than Earth's. It's made up mostly of carbon dioxide, CO2, roughly 95% of it. The rest is made of small amounts of nitrogen, N2, about 2.6%, argon, R, around 1.9%, oxygen, O2, just 0.13%, and tiny traces of water vapor and methane. So, it's not exactly the kind of air we can breathe, and it doesn't offer much protection from radiation either. That's why landing on Mars is such a complex maneuver. A great example is NASA's Perseverance rover, which successfully landed on Mars in 2021, but only after an extremely precise and carefully engineered entry and descent sequence. From a thermodynamic and heat transfer perspective, Mars's atmosphere behaves very differently from Earth's. It's much thinner, which means it doesn't slow down descending spacecraft as effectively, but it can still generate intense heat during entry. For this reason, SpaceX will likely need to develop an entirely new heat shield, specifically designed to handle the unique conditions of the Martian atmosphere. And according to Elon Musk, this may need to be ready as early as 2031. The latest images of Starship's heat shield date back to 2024, but it's clear that it will still take a lot of time and testing before it becomes fully complete, reliable, and operational. The heat shield is one of the most critical components of Starship. Even a minor issue could lead to a failed re-entry and jeopardize the entire mission. But that's not the only challenge. SpaceX also needs to develop a reliable landing system, especially for missions returning to Earth. Right now, Starship doesn't have traditional landing legs. The plan is for it to rely on Mechazilla, the giant tower designed to catch the vehicle mid-air, just like it does with the booster. However, this catch maneuver has never been tested in a real orbital flight. And here's the big problem. On other planets like the Moon or Mars, we don't have launch towers or recovery systems like Mechazilla. That makes things a lot more complicated. Starship will need to be able to land and take off autonomously, which means it will require strong, reliable landing legs that can handle uneven terrain, dust, and completely different atmospheric conditions compared to Earth. Just like the Falcon 9, Starship will also need to perform a smooth and fully autonomous landing. But now let's talk about another key point, mission planning, and how such a mission can actually be carried out. We can't just decide to go to Mars whenever we feel like it, especially without considering major risks like cosmic radiation and other mission-critical factors. The reality is that we have to wait until Earth and Mars are properly aligned, in what's known as a favorable launch window. This launch window only opens approximately once every 26 months, due to the different orbital speeds of Earth and Mars around the Sun. Only during these specific times is the trajectory short enough and energy efficient enough to make the trip possible. When planning a crewed mission to Mars, there are generally two possible mission profiles to consider. The first scenario includes a 180-day journey to Mars, about 6 months, a 210-day stay on the Martian surface, and a 430-day return trip back to Earth. These are incredibly long durations, and they highlight a key issue. Astronauts would spend much more time in space than actually on the surface of Mars. The second scenario, on the other hand, involves a much longer stay on the Martian surface, while keeping similar travel times for the outbound and return legs. Both mission types come with their own set of challenges, trade-offs, and risks. That's why it's essential to carefully assess which approach makes the most sense, depending on scientific goals, crew safety, and the available launch window. And this is where things get really serious. It's absolutely essential to prepare astronauts both mentally and physically. We're not just talking about sending machines, these are real people. And they can't be launched into deep space without fully understanding the risks and consequences involved. The crew selected for a mission to Mars would be facing the longest, most complex, and demanding journey in human history. And for that reason, the idea of a crewed Mars mission still seems unrealistic at this stage, at least, without extremely careful and multidisciplinary preparation.
All right, folks, that's it for today. We've explored some incredible challenges, bold dreams, and the tough realities of space exploration. If you enjoyed this trip through the stars, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next episode. See you soon on our next galactic adventure.